In a city of millions, it took one wrong turn and a cracked phone screen to bring two worlds together. Amara was a woman invisible to the elite until she crashed into the private sanctuary of Kai Nakamura. To the world, he is a titan of industry. To her, he's the man who waited in the rain to make sure she was safe. A mistake brought them together, but a secret contract will keep them from falling apart. The Chicago rain wasn't the romantic kind you saw in movies. It was a cold, needle-sharp downpour that soaked through Amara Brooks's thin polyester uniform in seconds. She stood on the curb outside the Westin, her feet throbbing after a 12-hour shift, scrubbing floors and changing linens for people who didn't know her name. Her phone screen was cracked, the battery hovering at a precarious 3%. With trembling thumbs, she swiped on the rideshare app. The price for a ride back to her cramped South Side apartment was surging, but she didn't have a choice. Her bus pass was empty, and the midnight air was dangerous for a woman alone. Black sedan, plate. 7 Alpha 9, she whispered, squinting through the sheets of gray water. A sleek, obsidian black car glided to the curb. It didn't have a glowing sticker in the window. But in this rain, Amara didn't care. She yanked the back door open and dived inside, the smell of expensive leather and sandalwood hitting her like a physical weight. Thank God, she exhaled, fumbling with her wet umbrella. I thought I was going to drown out there. I'm going to 74th and Stony, please, and if you could crank the heat, I'd appreciate it. There was a heavy, suffocating silence. Amara looked up, wiping droplets from her eyelashes. In the rearview mirror, she didn't see a distracted driver looking at a GPS. She saw a pair of sharp, intensely dark eyes framed by a face that looked like it had been carved from marble. The man in the driver's seat wasn't wearing a casual hoodie. He was in a bespoke charcoal suit, his hands, wrapped around a steering wheel that bore a logo she didn't recognize, were large and steady. "Get out," the man said. His voice was deep, a low baritone that vibrated in the small space. Amara froze. "Excuse me? I have the app right here. I know it's late and I'm soaked, but I'm paying for the ride." "I am not your driver," he interrupted, turning his head slightly. His profile was striking, high cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. "And you are dripping dirty rainwater onto $5,000 Italian leather." Amara's face burned. She looked down at the seat. A puddle was indeed forming beneath her. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I thought the app said a black sedan." "There are 10,000 black sedans in this city, Miss Amara Brooks." She reached for the door handle, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm sorry, Mr. Nakamura, Kai Nakamura." The name hit her like a bolt of lightning. She'd seen that name on the news. He was the Ice King of Nakamura Tech, the billionaire who had recently moved his headquarters to Chicago. She was a maid who lived paycheck to paycheck, and she had just tracked mud into the private vehicle of one of the wealthiest men in the country. "I'm leaving. I'm so sorry," she stammered, tugging at the handle. It didn't budge. "It's locked." Kai looked at her through the mirror again. He saw the way her hands shook, the way her cheap uniform was plastered to her skin, and the genuine exhaustion etched into the corners of her wide, brown eyes. He also saw the grit, the way she didn't beg, even though she looked terrified. "It's midnight," Kai said, his voice dropping an octave. "The neighborhood you mentioned. It's not safe for you to be standing on a curb waiting for another car that might not show up." "I'll be fine," she lied, her teeth beginning to chatter. Kai looked at the dashboard clock, then back at her. "Sit back. Don't touch anything else." "What?" "I'm taking you home," he said, shifting the car into gear. "But if you get a single drop of water on the front console, I'm sending you the cleaning bill." Amara sank into the plush seat, feeling like an intruder in a temple. As the car pulled away from the curb, the silence was thick, broken only by the rhythmic hum of the engine and the rain drumming on the roof. "You work at the Westin?" Kai asked after a few minutes, his eyes fixed on the road. "In housekeeping, yeah," Amara replied, hugging herself to stay warm. "It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on." "Hard work is never a lack of glamour," Kai remarked, though he sounded like he was speaking more to himself than her. "It's just a different kind of prison." Amara looked at him, surprised by the cynicism in his voice. "For a billionaire, you sound like you know a lot about prisons." Kai's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. "Money doesn't buy freedom, Miss Brooks. It just buys a better class of walls." They spent the rest of the ride in a silence that was surprisingly less tense than it had started. As they pulled up to her crumbling apartment building, the contrast was jarring. His million-dollar car idling in front of a building with boarded-up windows and flickering streetlights. "Thank you, Mr. Nakamura," Amara said, her hand on the door. I really am sorry about the seat." "I don't have much, but I can pay for—" "Forget the seat," Kai said, turning to look at her fully for the first time. The dim light of the street lamp caught the gold flecks in his eyes. "Go inside. Lock your door." Amara nodded and hurried out into the rain. She didn't look back until she was inside the foyer. When she peered through the glass, the black sedan was still there, its headlights cutting through the dark. He waited until she had cleared the second-floor landing and waved from her window before he finally drove away. She thought that would be the end of it. A strange story to tell her sister. She didn't know that Kai Nakamura had spent the last hour mesmerized by the scent of her cocoa butter lotion that lingered in his car, or that he was already looking up the staffing agency for the Westin Hotel. The following Monday, Amara's world shifted on its axis. She was summoned to the housekeeping manager's office at the Westin, a cramped room that usually smelled of stale coffee and discipline. She expected a reprimand for a missed corner or a misplaced towel, but instead she found her manager, Mrs. Higgins, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Amara, pack your things," Mrs. Higgins said, smoothing her apron. "A private client has requested a dedicated housekeeper for his penthouse. He contacted the agency specifically asking for someone with discretion and a high tolerance for silence. They looked at your file. No complaints, perfect attendance. You've been reassigned." Amara frowned. "A private client? Who?" "Nakamura Tech," Mrs. Higgins whispered, as if the name itself were a holy relic. "It pays triple your current hourly rate. There's a non-disclosure agreement. Sign it, and the car is waiting downstairs." Amara's heart did a slow, heavy roll in her chest. Kai. 30 minutes later, she was standing in the foyer of a penthouse that occupied the top 2 floors of a glass tower overlooking Lake Michigan. It was minimalist, cold, and achingly beautiful. All white marble, black steel, and floor-to-ceiling windows that made it feel like she was floating in the clouds. "You're late," a voice echoed. Kai stood at the top of a floating staircase. He was dressed in a black turtleneck and slacks, looking less like a CEO and more like a dark prince in a lonely castle. He descended the stairs with a predatory grace, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "I didn't know you were the client," Amara said, clutching her bag. "Did you do this because I ruined your car seat?" "I did this because I don't like strangers in my home, and you are the only person in this city who has entered my space without trying to sell me something or take a photograph of me," Kai said, stopping just a few feet away. He leaned in, the scent of sandalwood once again clouding her senses. "And because you look like you need the money more than the Westin needs your labor." "I don't want charity, Mr. Nakamura." "It isn't charity if I expect you to work," he countered, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register. "This place is 3,000 square feet of glass and ego. It needs to be pristine. My previous staff was chatty. I value silence. Do we have an understanding?" Amara looked around the vast, lonely space. "You live here all by yourself?" "Privacy is the only luxury I actually enjoy," he said curtly. "Your quarters are through the kitchen. You start now." The first 2 weeks were a dance of shadows. Amara learned Kai's routine with the precision of a clockmaker. He woke at 5 a.m., drank black coffee while staring at 3 different computer monitors, and left by 7 a.m. He returned late, often past midnight, looking drained, his tie loosened, and his eyes shadowed with a fatigue that no amount of money could fix. She kept her side of the bargain. She worked in silence. She polished the marble until she could see her reflection, and she organized his library by color and subject. But she couldn't help the small acts of rebellion against his icy lifestyle. One evening, noticing he hadn't eaten anything but protein bars for 3 days, Amara decided to ignore the no-cooking rule in her contract. She made a pot of West African peanut stew, the way her mother used to make it, the savory, spicy aroma filling the sterile penthouse. She was just finishing up when the front door chimed. Kai walked in, looking more haggard than usual. He stopped dead in his tracks, his nose wrinkling as he caught the scent. "What is that smell?" he demanded, tossing his briefcase onto the sofa. "Dinner," Amara said, appearing from the kitchen with a bowl. "You look like you're about to collapse, and I'm pretty sure humans can't survive on espresso and spite alone." Kai stared at the bowl she held out. "I didn't authorize this." "So fire me," she challenged, her chin tilting upward. "But eat the stew first. It's a waste of good spices otherwise." Kai looked from the bowl to Amara. No one talked to him like this. No one challenged his authority in his own sanctuary. He should have been angry, but the warmth radiating from the kitchen was the first thing that had made the penthouse feel like a home in months. He took the bowl. He took a bite. The heat of the ginger and the richness of the peanuts seemed to melt something inside him. He sat at the kitchen island, his expensive suit jacket discarded, and ate in a silence that was no longer cold, but heavy with something else. "My mother used to cook like this," he said quietly, staring into the bowl. "Before she died. In Tokyo we had a small kitchen. It always smelled of toasted sesame and soy. When my father built the empire, he decided we were too refined for home cooking. We had chefs. We had menus. We lost the smell of home." Amara leaned against the counter, watching him. "My mom says that food is the only way to talk to someone's soul when their ears are closed." Kai looked up, his dark eyes locking onto hers. For the first time, he didn't look like the Ice King. He looked like a man who was very, very lonely. "Amara," he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "Why are you still here? You could have taken the first paycheck and found a job that didn't involve scrubbing my floors." "Maybe I saw something in the car that night," she whispered. "What?" "A man who waits in the rain to make sure a stranger gets inside safely," she said. "That man is worth scrubbing floors for." The air between them charged with a sudden electric tension. Kai reached across the counter, his fingers brushing against her hand. His skin was warm, a startling contrast to his cold reputation. Just as he began to pull her closer, his phone vibrated on the marble, a harsh, buzzing reminder of the world outside. He looked at the screen, and his face instantly hardened. The mask was back. "It's my father," he said, his voice flat. "He's arriving from Tokyo tomorrow. He expects me to be engaged to the daughter of the Shinwa group by the end of the month." Amara felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She pulled her hand back, the distance between the billionaire and the maid suddenly feeling like an unbridgeable canyon. "I should finish the laundry. she said softly, turning away. "Amara, wait." But she was already gone. Leaving Kai alone in his glass palace with the fading scent of peanut stew and the realization that he was falling for the one woman he was never supposed to notice. The arrival of Kenji Nakamura was not a family visit. It was a hostile takeover. By the following afternoon, the penthouse was no longer a quiet sanctuary. It was filled with assistants in gray suits, the sharp clicking of heels, and the scent of expensive tobacco. Kenji, a man who seemed to be made of iron and tradition, sat in Kai's study like a king reclaiming a throne. Amara tried to remain invisible. She kept her head down, moving through the periphery of the chaos with a tray of tea. But as she entered the study, she caught the tail end of a conversation that made her blood run cold. "The merger with Shinwa is the only way to stabilize the European markets, Kai." Kenji's voice was like grinding stones. "Aya is already in the city. You will host her for dinner tonight. This distraction in Chicago has gone on long enough." "I am not a pawn to be moved across your board, father," Kai replied. He was standing by the window, his back to the room. "The company is thriving under my direction. I don't need a marriage of convenience." "You need a legacy," Kenji snapped. He glanced toward the door and saw Amara. His eyes narrowed, raking over her uniform with a look of profound distaste. "And you need to surround yourself with people of your own stature, not common help." Amara felt the sting of the words, but she didn't flinch. She set the tea service down with a steady hand. "Your tea, Mr. Nakamura. Oolong, as you requested." Kenji didn't acknowledge her. He waited until she left the room before speaking again, his voice loud enough to carry through the heavy oak door. "Even your staff is a reflection of your lack of discipline lately, Kai. Replace her. Get someone from the agency with a proper pedigree." Amara retreated to her small room off the kitchen, her heart heavy. She knew this was coming. The Ice King didn't marry the maid. He married the heiress. She looked at the small pile of textbooks on her nightstand. She had been saving her triple-pay checks to enroll in a nursing program. She had a life to build, one that didn't involve pining for a man who lived in a glass tower. That evening, the penthouse was transformed for a formal dinner. Aya, the daughter of the Shinwa group, arrived in a dress that cost more than Amara made in a year. She was beautiful, poised, and perfectly suited for Kai's world. Amara was tasked with serving the 5-course meal. It was a special kind of torture. Watching Kai sit across from a woman who was his social equal, seeing the way his father beamed at the pair. But Kai was different tonight. He was silent, his eyes rarely leaving his plate, his jaw set in a hard line. As Amara reached over to refill Kai's water glass, her hand brushed against his shoulder. For a fleeting second, his fingers caught hers beneath the table, hidden by the silk tablecloth. It was a desperate, grounding touch, a silent plea for her to stay. "Miss," Aya said, her voice high and melodic, "this sauce is a bit heavy. Could you bring some lemon?" "Of course," Amara replied, pulling her hand away from Kai. As she turned toward the kitchen, the front door buzzer rang. Usually the doorman handled visitors, but this was persistent. Amara went to the intercom. "Amara? Amara. I know you're in there." It was a voice she recognized and dreaded. Marcus, her ex-boyfriend, a man who had been a shadow over her life for years, always looking for a handout or a way to drag her back down. "Marcus, you can't be here," she whispered into the intercom. "I'm working." "I saw the car, Amara, the big black one. I followed you last week. You're living like a queen while I'm struggling? You owe me." Through the glass door of the foyer, Amara saw the elevator doors open. Marcus had somehow slipped past the lobby security. He was loud, disheveled, and angry. The dining room went silent. Kenji Nakamura stood up, his face a mask of fury. "What is this? Who is this man?" Marcus burst into the living area, his eyes wide as he took in the opulence. "Amara, tell these people who I am. Tell them you're coming home." "Marcus, please leave," Amara said, her voice trembling. She felt the weight of Kenji's judgment and Aya's shocked silence. This was the nightmare, the poor girl bringing her messy life into their pristine world. "Is this the help you've hired, Kai?" Kenji sneered. "A woman who brings street thugs into your home?" Kai stood up slowly. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at Aya. He walked straight toward Amara, who was standing frozen as Marcus reached for her arm. "Let go of her," Kai said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that carried the weight of a mountain. "And who are you, her sugar daddy?" Marcus laughed, but it was nervous. Kai didn't blink. He stepped between them, his taller frame shielding Amara completely. "I am the man who is going to have you arrested for trespassing and assault if you don't remove your hand from her in the next 3 seconds." Security, finally alerted, burst into the room and tackled Marcus, dragging him toward the elevator. The silence that followed was deafening. "Disgraceful," Kenji whispered. "Kai, fire her immediately. This is an embarrassment to the Nakamura name." Amara looked at the floor. She felt exposed, humiliated. Her past had followed her into the one place she had felt safe. "I'll go," she whispered. "Mr. Nakamura is right. I don't belong here." She turned to run to her room, but Kai's hand clamped firmly around her wrist. "You aren't going anywhere," Kai said, his voice ringing through the penthouse. He turned to face his father, his eyes burning with a fire that eclipsed the older man's coldness. "You're right, Father. She doesn't belong here." Amara's heart sank. "She doesn't belong here as a maid," Kai continued, his grip on her hand softening, his fingers interlacing with hers. "She belongs here as my guest, as my partner. And if that is an embarrassment to your name, then you are welcome to take your name and your merger and leave my home." Kenji's face turned a shade of purple. "You would throw away everything for a girl who scrubs floors?" "I would throw away everything for the only person who has looked at me and seen a man instead of a balance sheet," Kai replied. Aya stood up, gracefully picking up her clutch. "I think the dinner is over," she said with a knowing, almost sympathetic look at Amara. "Good night, Kai. You always were too stubborn for your own good." After the penthouse cleared, after Kenji had stormed out promising to disinherit his son, the silence returned. But it wasn't the cold silence of the first day. It was heavy with the weight of what had just been said. Amara looked up at Kai. "You just lost everything. Your father, the merger. Why would you do that?" Kai reached up, his thumb brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "I didn't lose everything, Amara. For the first time in my life, I feel like I finally have something worth keeping." "I'm just a maid, Kai," she whispered. "No," he said, pulling her into the space of his heart. "You're the woman who got into the wrong car and pointed me in the right direction." 6 months later, the Chicago skyline was a glittering tapestry of gold and blue. The Ice King had not melted, but he had certainly transformed. The business journals were abuzz. Kai Nakamura had successfully executed a management buyout, severing the toxic ties with his father's conglomerate. He was no longer a prince under a crown. He was a king of his own making. But the real gossip wasn't about the stocks. It was about the mystery woman who had been seen by his side in the rare moments he left his office. Amara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the penthouse master suite, breathless. She wasn't wearing a polyester uniform or a thrift store coat. She was draped in a gown of midnight blue silk that shifted like water when she moved. The off-the-shoulder cut highlighted the rich glow of her skin, and a simple, elegant diamond necklace, a gift from Kai, rested at the base of her throat. You're staring at yourself like you don't recognize her, Kai's voice came from the doorway. She turned, smiling nervously. Kai was in a sharp tuxedo, his hair swept back, looking every bit the titan of industry. I don't. 6 months ago, I was worried about whether my bus pass had enough for the week. Now I'm going to the Symphony Gala as your date. I'm terrified, Kai. He crossed the room, his hand settling firmly on her waist. Don't be. They'll look at you and see exactly what I see, the strongest, most radiant woman in this city. And if anyone looks down their nose at you, remember, you're the one who survived the Westin. These people couldn't survive a day without a personal assistant to tie their shoes. Amara laughed, the tension breaking. I just don't want to embarrass you. Amara, he said, turning her to face him, his expression intensely serious. You are the only part of my life I'm truly proud of. Let's go show them why. The gala was held at the Art Institute of Chicago. As they stepped out of the black sedan, the same car where it had all started, the flashbulbs were blinding. The Maid-turned-Muse narrative had leaked to the press, and the elite were hungry for a scandal. As they entered the grand ballroom, a hush fell over the crowd. Heads turned, whispers hissed like steam, and eyes raked over Amara's dress, her hair, her posture. Is that her? A woman in pearls whispered loudly. The one from the hotels. Amara felt her heart hammer, but she remembered Kai's words. She shifted her shoulders back, tilted her chin up, and walked into the room with the grace of a woman who had earned her place through grit and heart. Halfway through the evening, they were cornered by a group of investors, including a few of Kenji Nakamura's old associates. A bold choice, Kai, one man said, his eyes flicking dismissively to Amara. We were surprised you didn't choose someone with more experience in these circles. International relations can be so delicate. Kai didn't even look at the man. He took a sip of his champagne, his gaze fixed on Amara with a look of pure adoration. Actually, Amara has more international relations experience than anyone here. She understands the world as it actually is, not just as it looks from a private jet. Her perspective saved my company, and her heart saved me. If that's not distinguished enough for this circle, then perhaps this circle is too small for us. The investor flushed and stammered an apology. Amara felt a surge of pride, not because of the dress or the jewelry, but because she was with a man who defended her dignity as fiercely as he defended his empire. Later that night, as the music slowed to a romantic swell, Kai led her onto the balcony overlooking the Millennium Park. The cold wind of the lake bit at them, but they were wrapped in the warmth of each other. You did it, he whispered, pulling her close. The glass slipper fits. The slipper was always a bit tight, Kai, Amara teased, resting her head on his chest. But the man holding it? He's just right. Kai reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't need the theater. He held it between them, the light of the city reflecting in the perfect solitaire diamond. I spent my whole life thinking that success was a destination, Kai said, his voice thick with emotion. But the night you got into my car, I realized I'd been driving in circles. You are my home, Amara. I don't want a merger, and I don't want a legacy. I want a life with you. Amara looked at the ring, then at the man who had seen her when she was invisible to the rest of the world. I thought I was getting into an Uber, she whispered, a tear of joy tracing a path down her cheek. I didn't know I was getting into my future. Is that a yes? Kai asked, a rare boyish grin breaking across his face. Yes, she said, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted of sandalwood, rain, and a love that bridged two worlds. 1,000 times, yes. In the distance, the city lights hummed, millions of stories unfolding beneath the clouds. But in that moment, High above the streets, a billionaire and a maid had found the only thing that couldn't be bought, sold, or polished to a shine. A love that was real,